The house was 43 degrees when I woke up, and the temperature was still falling. There was no heat, no power, and no running water. My children were asleep in the next room, and I did not know how I was going to keep them alive if the electricity did not come back on. I will never forget the sound of silence that morning. Not peaceful silence, but the kind that screams at you. There was no hum from the refrigerator, no buzz from the alarm clock, no heat clicking on like it had every winter morning for the 8 years we had lived in that house. It was February 15th, 2021, and outside our Houston home the temperature had dropped to 12 degrees. In Texas, where everything is built for 100-degree summers, not Arctic winters. My name is Elena Ramirez, and this is the story of how my family survived 4 days without power, heat, or water during the worst winter storm Texas had seen in over a century. This is not just a story about being cold. It is about discovering that the systems we trusted to keep us safe failed completely, and that when they did, we were on our own. Let me take you back to February 13th, 2 days before everything fell apart. I was scrolling through my phone during lunch break at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. Weather alerts kept appearing on my screen, winter storm warnings, freeze advisories, and mentions of something called a polar vortex. My co-workers and I laughed it off. We were Texans, and cold weather had never scared us. They are saying it might snow. I told my husband Miguel that evening when he came home from his construction job. Our kids, Emma, who was 7, and Lucas, who was 4, were already bouncing around the living room, thrilled by the idea. Miguel just shrugged and kissed my forehead, saying maybe work would get cancelled and he could build a snowman with them. That night we did what every Texan does when winter weather threatens. Absolutely nothing. We did not winterize the pipes, we did not stock up on emergency supplies, and we did not own a generator. The power had never gone out for more than a few hours before, not even during hurricanes. There was no reason to believe this time would be any different. The snow started falling Sunday morning on Valentine's Day. Emma and Lucas pressed their faces against the window, their breath fogging the glass as white flakes gathered on the lawn, something they had only ever seen in movies. Miguel and I sat on the couch wrapped in blankets, drinking coffee and laughing while the kids squealed with excitement at the sight. "This is magical," Emma whispered softly, as if she was afraid the moment might disappear if she spoke too loudly. I smiled at her, not knowing that magic was already turning into something else entirely. None of us understood that this quiet, beautiful snowfall was the beginning of the worst week of our lives. I woke up at 3:47 Monday morning to complete darkness and silence. I reached for my phone and saw the battery was already below half, with no internet connection. I nudged Miguel and told him the power was out. He mumbled that it would come back on like it always did, and rolled over to sleep. By 7 a.m., the house had dropped to 43 degrees. I bundled the kids in every layer they owned: pajamas, sweatpants over those, 2 pairs of socks, hoodies, and winter coats we rarely used. They thought it was an adventure at first. "Why is it so cold, Mommy?" Lucas asked, his little breath visible in the air. "Just a little power outage," I lied. I was lying to him and to myself. I checked my phone obsessively. The Electric Reliability Council of Texas had issued a statement about rolling blackouts to manage demand. Rolling meant rotation, right? Surely we'd be back on in a few hours. That first day, we huddled together in the living room under every blanket we owned. Miguel and I took turns keeping the kids distracted: board games, stories, anything to keep their minds off the cold. We ate cold sandwiches for lunch and cold cereal for dinner. The food in the refrigerator stayed fresh because the entire house had become a refrigerator itself. By Monday night, the temperature had dropped to 38 degrees. "Miguel," I whispered after the kids had fallen asleep, curled up under a mountain of blankets, "this isn't rolling blackouts. We've been out for almost 20 hours. He pulled me closer, shivering. "It has to come back on soon," he said. But it didn't. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not for a very long time. Tuesday morning, day 2, the house was 32 degrees inside. That's when I heard a crack, like a gunshot echoing through the walls. I ran to the bathroom to find water spraying from a burst pipe, freezing as it hit the floor. Miguel shut off the main water valve, but the damage was done. We now had no power, no heat, and no running water. "It's okay," I told Emma and Lucas, fighting to keep my voice steady. "We're okay. This is just temporary." But my hands were shaking as I texted my sister across town. No response. I called my mom in San Antonio, voicemail. I checked the news on my dying phone for 0.5 million Texans without power. The entire grid was on the verge of collapse. This wasn't a local outage. This was a catastrophic statewide infrastructure failure. What we didn't know then, what no one told us, was that it was entirely preventable. Texas operates on its own power grid, separate from the rest of the country, specifically to avoid federal regulations. After the last major freeze in 2011, recommendations were made to winterize the grid. Insulate pipes, protect natural gas facilities, prepare for extreme cold. Those recommendations were ignored. Winterization wasn't mandated. It cost money, and the power companies decided it wasn't worth it. How often does it get this cold in Texas? Those decisions, made in boardrooms a decade earlier, were why my children were now sleeping in a house colder than our refrigerator. By Tuesday afternoon, we had burned through most of our phone batteries trying to find information, contact family, and locate warming centers. Miguel's construction buddy texted that his neighborhood had a few houses with power. We could go there. We loaded the kids into our car, which thankfully started, and drove through streets that looked apocalyptic, abandoned vehicles stuck in ice, darkened traffic lights, stores closed and locked. When we got to Miguel's friend's neighborhood, we found the same thing we had left. Darkness. His power had gone out an hour earlier. We drove home in silence, our gas tank now at a quarter full, unsure when stations would reopen. Wednesday, day 3, the house was 28 degrees inside. Lucas wouldn't stop crying, shaking from the cold no matter how many layers we put on him. Emma had gone quiet, which scared me more than crying. She just stared at nothing, occasionally asking when the heat would come back on. I'm a nurse. I know hypothermia. I know what prolonged cold does to the body, especially to children. I checked their fingers and toes constantly for signs of frostbite and made them move, do jumping jacks, anything to generate body heat. Miguel brought our small charcoal grill from the back porch. We didn't care about the rules anymore. We set it up in the garage with the door open, desperate for any warmth, aware we risked carbon monoxide poisoning. We huddled near it, breathing the faint heat, hoping it would be enough to keep the children alive while checking our phones for news with the last bits of battery. That's when I started seeing stories online. A grandmother in Houston had died of hypothermia in her home. A family in their car, running it for heat, killed by carbon monoxide. An 11-year-old boy in Conroe, found frozen in his bed. People were dying in Texas in 2021, while the system we trusted had failed completely, leaving ordinary citizens exposed to disaster. Urquhart and the governor were nowhere to be found. Statements I managed to read before my phone died blamed unprecedented demand and supply challenges. They mentioned frozen wind turbines, which later turned out to be false. The real problem was frozen natural gas facilities and power plants that were never winterized. The system hadn't just failed, it was designed to fail people like us. Wednesday night, huddled under every blanket with my family, wearing all our clothes, I made a decision. We couldn't stay. Thursday morning, day 4, it was 25 degrees inside. We packed everything we could fit in the car, extra blankets, what little food we had left, important documents. Our plan was simple: drive, find a hotel with power, or get to a warming center. Miguel scraped ice off the windshield while I got the kids into their car seats, bundling them in coats and blankets. They looked like little marshmallows. "Where are we going, Mommy?" Emma asked, her voice small. "Somewhere warm," I promised, hoping it was true. The roads were terrifying, black ice everywhere. We saw a vehicle crashed into a fence, likely lost control. We drove 15 miles per hour, our gas gauge creeping toward empty. Every gas station was closed or out of fuel. Every hotel had no vacancy or no power. We tried heading south thinking it might be warmer, but it wasn't. After 3 hours of driving in circles, we finally saw lights, cars parked outside a community center. A blessed sight, and the warmth inside felt like salvation. The warming center was chaos. Hundreds crammed into a space meant for maybe 50. Families huddled on the floor with whatever blankets they had brought. The smell of unwashed bodies and desperation filled the air. But it was warm. 65 degrees felt like paradise. A volunteer handed us water and crackers, saying power should be back soon across the city, though we'd been hearing that for days. We found a corner and settled in. The kids finally stopped shivering. Watching Emma and Lucas eat their crackers like a feast, something inside me broke. I'm a nurse. We are not rich, but we did everything right. Paying bills, maintaining our home, following the rules, none of it mattered. When the system collapsed, it failed everyone without a backup generator or a second home somewhere warm. I listened to other families' stories. An elderly man whose wife was on oxygen had to call 911 when her backup battery died. A single mother with 3 kids had lost all her food and had no way to replace it. A young couple had their entire apartment flooded from burst pipes. Nurses, teachers, construction workers, retail employees, the backbone of our city, all abandoned when the power failed. Friday afternoon, February 19th, our power finally came back on. We heard it from a neighbor's text while still at the warming center. We packed up and drove home, terrified it might go out again before we arrived. Walking in and flipping the light switch, seeing the lights come on, I started crying. Miguel turned the thermostat to 72. The heater clicked on the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The kids ran around the house, touching every light switch, celebrating electricity like Christmas morning. But relief was temporary. The burst pipe caused significant water damage. Homeowners' insurance was a nightmare of paperwork and deductibles. We had lost about $300 of food. Miguel missed 4 days of work without pay, and the hospital called asking when I could return. In the following weeks, the full scale of the disaster became clear. At least 246 Texans died, though some estimates put the number over 700. Billions of dollars in damages, tens of thousands of homes with burst pipes, and electricity bills reaching $5, $8, even $17,000 for a few days on variable rate plans. Hearings started. Elected officials testified. Executives made excuses. Meteorologists showed the storm had been forecasted days in advance. Engineers confirmed winterization recommendations from 2011 had been ignored. Governor Abbott blamed renewable energy and the Green New Deal, which Texas hadn't adopted. That narrative quickly collapsed when data showed frozen natural gas infrastructure caused the outages. Wind turbines accounted for only 13% of the outage capacity. Investigations revealed energy executives knew the grid was vulnerable. They chose profit over safety, gambling that another severe freeze wouldn't happen. They lost that bet. We, the citizens, paid the price. Some reforms were passed: winterization requirements, better emergency protocols, but it felt like too little, too late for families who lost everything and for people who didn't survive. It has been years since the freeze, and our house has recovered. Pipes fixed, drywall replaced, walls repainted. The physical scars are gone, but the other scars remain. Emma, now 10, still gets anxious when winter weather is forecast. Lucas has nightmares about being cold. Miguel and I bought a generator the following year, something we couldn't really afford but felt we couldn't live without. We stock extra water, batteries, blankets. We have a backup plan and a backup for the backup. We learned the hardest lesson a citizen can learn. You cannot trust the system to protect you when it matters most. The Texas power grid failure wasn't a natural disaster. It was a policy disaster. The result of deregulation without accountability and profits prioritized over people. Texas isn't unique. The same story plays out across America: crumbling infrastructure because maintenance doesn't generate profits, safety regulations ignored until catastrophe strikes. Citizens are told to take personal responsibility for systemic failures beyond their control. I think about those for days often, how quickly our middle-class lives turned into huddling for warmth in a community center. I also think about the volunteers at the warming center, neighbors checking on each other, strangers sharing what little they had, healthcare workers keeping hospitals running despite having no power in their own homes. When systems fail, people step up. We have to, because we cannot rely on the institutions that are supposed to protect us. If you take anything from our story, let it be this. First, Prepare for the worst. Don't assume infrastructure will hold. Have emergency supplies, water, non-perishable food, battery-powered devices, blankets, alternative heat sources. I know not everyone can afford a generator, but do what you can. The grid can fail. It has. It will again. Second, understand your utilities. After the storm, I read our electricity contract, learning about fixed versus variable rates, the grid we are on, and our rights as consumers. Knowledge is power, sometimes literally. Third, hold elected officials accountable. The Texas grid failure was predictable, caused by choices made by specific people. Vote. Demand winterization, grid improvements, and consequences for negligent decisions. Fourth, build community. Know your neighbors. Check on elderly or vulnerable people. Create networks of mutual aid. When institutions fail, communities survive. Finally, never forget. Do not let these disasters be forgotten. Politicians and executives must not escape accountability because time passes. Keep telling these stories, demanding better, and remembering those who suffered. 246 people died in Texas during a winter storm because the power grid wasn't prepared for weather that meteorologists forecasted days in advance. That's not a tragedy, it's negligence. Manslaughter at scale. I still live in Texas. Houston is home. My kids go to school. Miguel works here. My career is here, but I am no longer naive about the social contract we are supposed to have. They told us the grid was reliable. It wasn't. They told us they were managing the crisis. They weren't. They told us this was unprecedented and unpredictable. It was neither. Every time the temperature drops now, I watch the forecast obsessively. I charge every device, fill bathtubs with water, and make sure our generator fuel is fresh. I remember those for days vividly. We lived in a first world country that felt like the developing world. Being a responsible citizen and paying bills meant nothing. Survival came down to luck, privilege, and whether our neighborhood happened to be on the same grid as a hospital. I remember Emma asking when the heat would come back, not knowing what to say. I remember Lucas crying because he was too cold to sleep. I remember sitting in the warming center, watching my children eat crackers on a dirty floor, realizing this is what government failure looks like in real time. We survived the freeze. Thousands have similar stories. Hundreds didn't get to tell theirs. I tell ours not for pity or praise, but as a warning and a call to action. This can happen to you, and when it does, you will discover how fragile the system really is. Prepare, organize, demand better, and remember the people who died. Remember how it felt. Remember who failed you and why. They're counting on you to forget. Don't. I am Elena Ramirez. This was our story of surviving the Texas freeze. If you have gone through something similar, any infrastructure failure, any system collapse, share your story. We need to hear these voices. We need to remember. If this story made you think about your own preparedness, your own infrastructure, your own elected officials, good. That is exactly what should happen. Take care of each other, stay warm, and never forget how quickly the systems we trust can fail. That was our experience, and it could happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time.